Welcome to Boom Goddess Radio. This is Jennifer Davis Page, your host, and today we're featuring the history of Juneteenth. We're going to have a wonderful, informative discussion with two historians that are going to tell us everything that we need to know and answer any questions that I might have. Now, tell me, we're introducing to you Valerie Stanley and Johnny Bowens. Welcome to you both to Boom Goddess Radio.
Thank you.
Glad to be here.
Valerie, I'd like to start with you. Tell us what your role has been in the Juneteenth observation in Tucson, and for how long?
I've been involved with Juneteenth for probably the last 25 years. Sat on the committee for many, many years, and then after Bernie Starks died 6 years ago, I took over as the president of Juneteenth.
All right, and tell our listeners how when it got started officially in Arizona. When did it officially get started here?
June of 1970, so 51 years ago.
Oh, and what kinds of observances have you all had? I know since COVID last year you couldn't do anything in the park or anything, but tell me, what kinds of events have you been doing before COVID?
Well, Juneteenth, when it first started, it was in Vista del Pueblo, so it was very small then. Somebody told me they just went to the park the other day and visited and said they didn't know how all those people fit in that park because it's so small. But then we went to Kennedy Park, which then became a 3-day event because we had so much financial help from the city. I don't remember how long the events went on at Kennedy Park, but then the funding stopped from the city and we couldn't afford it anymore. And so we went to 1-day celebration. So then we went over to the Donna Liggins Center, which is just the Northwest Neighborhood Center, had it there, and then moved over to the Dunbar Cultural Center. And then from there, we went to the Tucson Community Center, which was in 2019. And then in 2020, not able to have a event. And this year, we're going to do virtual as well as live.
Well, let's hope next year we can just celebrate it properly with great fun, great food, and entertainment.
Yes.
Tell our audience a little bit about last year, or in 2019. How many attendants did you have for that one day?
We had approximately 3,500 attendees at the TCC. It was our first event there. We had outgrown the Dunbar, so when we had it at the Dunbar, we were just overloaded in capacity and couldn't fit any more vendors or anything. So we decided to move and go to the TCC, and it was a big success. We had more vendors, we had more entertainment, we had more visibility. And so it was wonderful being at the TCC. We had the food trucks outside on the side of the TCC, which was really nice, where people could just go out the side door and be able to get food and then bring it back inside and sit down and eat. And it was just nice to be in a place that was cool because, you know, usually we have the Juneteenth outside. So being indoors, it was really nice to have everybody comfortable and be able to sit down and enjoy whatever entertainment or informational or retail vendor booths that they were interested in.
Since we're doing it virtually this year, are you planning already for 2021 for next year? Are you putting those plans?
We have not. We won't start planning until after this Juneteenth is over.
Okay. All right. Johnny
Yes.
Bowens, thank you so much for joining and lending your voice to this important conversation. Tell us about your participation with Juneteenth and the Juneteenth committee, and please.
Well, my participation is that I started becoming involved in 1972 when I was director of cultural activities at Pima Community College. And in that way, I was approached in terms of having Pima College have some degree of, uh, of imprint in the community. And because our director of cultural activity, I lend financial support and other support for the Juneteenth festival that was held at A Mountain Park then. So my involvement spanned from 1972 to present.
Oh
And
my.
in that way, I've served as president of it for about maybe 20 years.
Now, is that just now your participation has just been in the Tucson area, or do you and Valerie coordinate with the people up in Phoenix and Flagstaff? Do you coordinate with other cities around the state, or has it just been a participation?
Just Tucson in terms of our focus.
And can you tell our listeners whether or not other cities around the state, I know Phoenix because it's the capital probably does, but do other cities around the state celebrate as wonderfully as Tucson does?
Yeah, I'm aware that that Sierra Vista, Yuma, Flagstaff, Winslow, and other communities in Tucson, I mean in Arizona, that has a African American population do some degree of celebration of Juneteenth.
Now, for my own information, in terms of African American residents, I'm sure it must be Phoenix must have the most African American residents. And is Tucson number 2 in terms of that population?
Yes.
All right. Okay, terrific. Now, to celebrate Juneteenth, what components do you have? I mean, let's talk. I know this last year was what it was in terms of not having anything. Did you do virtual last year or just nothing at all?
Valerie, if you can comment on that. You muted, Valerie.
We did nothing at all last year. We planned, and then when they shut the city down, we just figured it was too late to do anything virtual, so we just canceled it altogether.
Yeah.
I'm hoping that a lot of our listeners are getting good information from you guys, but I want to go back to kind of basic things that perhaps there are some people that just don't know. So can you tell me, I'm doing a show next week with a chef who's going to talk to us about the rich traditional foods of Juneteenth. But can you tell me, in my research, they said that red is the color of Juneteenth. Can we talk a little bit about that and why?
I don't know anything about red being the color of Juneteenth.
Yeah, I haven't heard that being the color either in terms of the particular color connected actually to Juneteenth. I haven't heard that connection.
Okay, well, stay tuned to my next podcast because we're going to be talking about the red being the traditional foods are all red, and red being one of the colors on the Juneteenth flag because of all the blood that was shed during slavery. So that's according to all the research that we've done. That's the information that we had, and that you wear red. Red is a color that you wear to Juneteenth events. So tell me about when I was doing some research on other states that celebrate. I understand that there's only 3 states in the union that don't celebrate. I don't know why. That's Hawaii, North Dakota, and South Dakota don't celebrate. But do you know how long all the other states have been celebrating? You guys have been doing it in Arizona for 50 years or 51 years. Do you have any idea when all of the states started celebrating it, or was it all at the same time?
I think it varied. It varied in terms of that initial one emanated out of Texas. And then as the residents from Texas migrated to different other states, they started the celebration in that particular state. So, so we've had it for 50 years. Other states have had it for maybe 30 years, 40, 20. So
Okay.
it all depends upon the motivation of the individual migrants in terms of them keeping that tradition alive and expanding it.
Okay. All right. Tell me why. How do people celebrate Juneteenth? I mean, traditionally in our neighborhoods, how do we celebrate? I mean, is there a when you have your events? What I mean, do you have authors there that have written Black authors that have written books? How do you celebrate um, all of the talents of African Americans at Juneteenth at your Juneteenth events?
Well, at our events, we celebrate local talent.
Hmm.
So we have a festival during the day, and we have a stage, and we present dancers and poets and um,
Speakers.
speakers. We have our politicians who come on and speak about the city and Juneteenth. But we have not have any had any published authors at our events.
Okay, what about corporations? Do you get support from national corporations that are based here in Arizona at all?
We have in the past had different organizations or companies sponsor us, like Desert Diamond Casino has been a big supporter of Juneteenth. Um, TEP, Cox Communications. So yes, we have had sponsors that are nationwide and local.
Oh, that's excellent. So do they participate in with money or just booths or how do they participate with you? Do they do they
Some
do
some
corporate?
of them both. Some of them do monetary sponsors, and some of them have do monetary and have booths at the festival.
Right.
Johnny, tell our listeners why Juneteenth is important to America.
I think Juneteenth is important to America because I think that I'm a historian and I work at University of Arizona in Africana Studies Department. And it's important for us to understand the actual history of Juneteenth. What normally we hear is that Abraham Lincoln signed the Emancipation Proclamation in 1863, and that many of the enslaved Africans didn't hear about it in Texas until 2 years later. But if we expand that is that what was Abraham Lincoln's motivation to free the enslaved Africans? Was it out of a sense of moral commitment? And I would submit that it was out of saving the Union. Because prior to him signing the Emancipation Proclamation, and there was two Emancipation Proclamations that he signed. The first one freed all the enslaved Africans in only those states that had seceded from the Union. It exempted those states that had slavery and didn't secede from the Union. It had another provision of compensation for the freeing those enslaved Africans. That was rejected. And the second Emancipation Proclamation had the provision of freeing Africans, but not the compensation connection. So his motivation was not necessarily a moral motivation, but his motivation was that to preserve the Union, because prior to him signing the Emancipation Proclamation, the North was at the point of losing the war.
Okay.
Every battle that was fought between the North and the South prior to 1863, the North lost. And that was the motivation to not only free African people, but also to allow African men, particularly, to join the Union Army. And that was the main, I would say, reason why the North was victorious, because of the African dedication, and participation in the war effort.
We're going to take a brief break, Johnny and Valerie, and when we come back, we'll continue this important conversation.
Okay.
Did you know dragging chains can spark a wildfire?
Only you can prevent wildfires.
Welcome back to Boone Goddess Radio. This is Jennifer Davis Page, your host, and I'm here today with Valerie Stanley and Johnny Bowens, and we're continuing our conversation on the history of Juneteenth. Johnny, you were talking before we went to break about Abraham Lincoln and him starting Juneteenth and why. Do you want to tell that story, please?
Well, the story is that what was the motivation of signing the Emancipation Proclamation? And I submit that the reason why President Lincoln signed the Emancipation Proclamation, not because of his moral commitment, but he signed it based on political necessity of making it much more difficult for the South to fight. Because prior to that period, every battle that the North and the South fought, the North lost. The North was at the brink of losing the war. And that Emancipation Proclamation allowed African people to join the Union Army and fight on that side. And it made a tremendous difference in terms of the outcome. Those fights now become to be victorious because of African people had an emotional stake in the outcome, and he fought much harder than the white soldiers. And I would submit that was the reason why Lincoln signed the Emancipation Proclamation, out of political necessity, not because of his moral commitment that he had towards slavery. Because he didn't actually, when you look at Lincoln's in itself, Lincoln really didn't oppose slavery. We can see that in his writings, things that he said about slavery and how he felt about African people. He didn't feel as if African people were his equal. It's documented. So that's why I'm saying that we need to go just not on what's on the surface, but look behind and see the true story of Lincoln and also the Civil War.
The 40 acres and a mule. Tell our listeners why Abraham Lincoln, was he using that as an incentive for Africans to join the army?
I would say that 40 acres and a mule didn't emanate from Lincoln, but emanated from African people themselves.
Okay.
That they suggested that if we're going to make a commitment, we want something in return. And that 40 acres and a mule represented that if you want anyone to be independent, if they had a mule and 40 acres, they can be self-sufficient themselves. So that slogan emanated from the African people themselves and did not emanate from the White House.
And tell me, did Abraham Lincoln, did Juneteenth get its name from Abraham Lincoln?
No, the name came from when the African people in Texas heard about the Emancipation Proclamation from General Granger. It was June 19th, 1865. So they just named it Juneteenth.
I see. Valerie, can you tell me, you said that you'd like very much to get more people involved in the committees, and you want to talk a little bit about how people that are listening to our show can get more involved on your committee for next year. I know you haven't started for next year yet, but can you just tell them briefly how they can reach out to you, or if you want to give an email address that
Absolutely.
they can send out.
We start our planning in October. Well, late September, early October for the following year. So we'll start in October or late September this year, planning for next year's festival. So we encourage everybody, young, old, middle age, whatever, to get involved in the planning because we do events during the year leading up to Juneteenth. So we need help with poetry events and concerts and um, fundraisers. So if anybody wants to get involved, they can email us at tucsonjuneteenth@gmail.com, or you can call me at 520-405-5826.
So young people that are listening can also participate, right? If you're in high school, you can also
We,
participate. Is that right?
yes, we encourage young people because soon we need to pass the baton and we need to pass it to the young people. It's their turn. So we definitely encourage young people, junior high to high school students to get involved as well.
Um, Now, when our show is heard on the Pima Community College and on Boom Goddess Radio and KXCI and Radio Phoenix, other communities will also hear it, and they will want to participate. Now, have you ever given it any thought? And I don't know why I'm making you want to work with other cities when you're doing such a good job now here. But I'm just saying, have you do you know what kind of 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 events have been held in other cities, and can you work with them to help? I'm giving you more work to do. Have
Yes.
you worked with them to help their communities have a bigger, better one? I mean, can they use you as a guide if they need to?
Absolutely. I know that Phoenix holds a celebration on the day of Juneteenth, so that it's always hold it the third Saturday in June, and I believe they do as well. And this year just happens to be on Juneteenth, so it's great. But no, we have not collaborated with anyone. And as far as other cities, I do believe that I only know about Phoenix, and they only do theirs for maybe 4 or 5 hours on that Saturday. So,
Okay.
but would love to collaborate with other cities and try
Well,
to
maybe
do
I'll
other.
maybe I'll reach out to all those other cities, and if when you start getting calls and they say Jennifer told me to call you, then you know I then you do you think
Not a
that I
not
was
a problem.
I was stirring the pot. With the few minutes that we have left, Johnny, do you want to talk a little bit about Pima Community and College and why they're involved and why they were so generous to let us put
Well,
our show on their YouTube channel?
well, I think Pima Community College, since I retired from there in 2001, and since Pima opened in 1970, they have been community oriented, and um, and we've had individuals who served in key key capacities reach out to the community to offer whatever kind of financial and technical and other support that they can. And Pima have been that friend to not just the Juneteenth, but also other organizations too.
That that's really wonderful. Now, with the YouTube channel, is there a what is my question? Is there a group that do they participate in a lot of African American events that are going on in the community during the year, not just Juneteenth, but are they an advocate for all of them? Pima Community College.
I believe so. Yes,
Yeah.
I believe they're involved in a lot in the community as far as the African American community. Yes.
Excellent,
I know
excellent.
they're involved with Cinco de Mayo. They're involved with the Native American celebrations. Uh, so most of the celebrations that I'm aware of that happen in Tucson, there is a connection of Pima Community College involvement.
Do you have any other comments? We have about 4 minutes left. Do you have any other comments about Juneteenth? What you'd like to see in the future for Juneteenth that you don't have now that our listeners could possibly help you with? Let's talk a little bit about that.
What I was
As I was speaking to the president of the Dunbar Association a couple of weeks ago, he was making some suggestions about us bringing Juneteenth back to the Dunbar. And the only reason why we left the Dunbar is because we outgrew it, not that we did not want to have our festival there. So he was making some suggestions or having some thoughts about Juneteenth next year and trying to close off Main Street between Speedway and Fifth and doing a huge block party for Juneteenth next year. One of the young ladies who's on the board at the Dunbar is from Chicago and knows a man who has a traveling amusement park. So he wants to come to Tucson and set up his amusements, and we thought that would be great for the block party, and then be able to take Juneteenth back to the Dunbar because it's a historical Black site.
Right.
We'd like to continue to partner with Dunbar and be a part of their coalition, which we are a part of their coalition, but we'd like to have Juneteenth back there again.
But if we're running out of space at Dunbar, can we have it for a couple of days rather than just one day, so that maybe we can have it for the full 3-day weekend and still have it at Dunbar, and people from all over the city can attend?
Yes, we talked about that because I said, why bring the man out here from Chicago for a day? We might as well get our money's worth and have him here for 3 days. So we talked about, again, having the Juneteenth Festival for 3 days next year.
Yeah.
It's all contingent right now on being able to shut down that street.
And when you look around in terms of Tucson, 4th Avenue, they shut down the street when they have the Asian program. They shut down the street. So it's not as if if we want to go that direction, that is something that Tucson have done in the past, and that would provide more space than having just confined to just the Dunbar property.
Well, you guys know a lot of people in town. You've been at this a long time. So let's just see if we can make that happen. We will just absolutely make that a theme of ours to make it happen and shut down what needs to be shut down and have a wonderful event and get more and more African American food trucks that can sell and celebrate the red foods of, I know you guys said you didn't know about the red foods, but they had the red foods of including a red velvet cake and cherry and strawberry pie. So as I said, we're going to talk about that on our next show, about the wonderful foods of Juneteenth. I want to thank both of you for joining Boom Goddess Radio today and talking about the history of Juneteenth. And again, I do you have a link for the virtual? How can people join the virtual?
They just need to log on to YouTube and search Pima Community College TV.
Terrific.
And it will be shown on their YouTube channel.
We thank you very much, and we thank our Boom Goddess listeners. This is Jennifer signing off. Have a lovely day.
Thank you.